Slip here to Jones, gets a block, and Jones out in front. They're trying to chase him down. He's inside the 10, and Jones down the sideline. He is in for the touchdown. 67 yards.
He's seen man-to-man coverage on a linebacker on his running back. He does the same thing. A little short motion, get him the ball, and there's just no way that they can compete with Aaron Jones in that kind of space.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Packers Total Access. My name is Clayton. You can check us out on packernet.com. You can find me on Twitter at Packers_access. If you'd like to email the show, you can send a message to PackersTotalAccess@gmail.com. You can text the show at 865-658-5824. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to everyone who showed up last night for the Tony Mandarich interview. What an awesome time. What an awesome conversation. Learned so much about the guy. Just a humble human being. And it's so crazy because everything you've seen in the past on Tony Mandarich has just been, he's this cocky, arrogant, selfish person, drug addict, all these things. And I'm thinking, man, that was a long time ago, right? And then you hear his story and it's like, wow, what a comeback. Just an amazing person. It was such an honor to have a conversation with him. But we're doing things a little different today. I just decided, you know what, I got a little extra time. Let's go live on YouTube and Twitter. This will be in podcast form as well. So appreciate everybody tuning in, making us a part of your day. And I've got a little video I'm going to share about 9 minutes long. It's from another podcast that I like to listen to. It's actually called, I believe, Journey to the Draft. And it's kind of an Eagles-based podcast, but they go through and do a lot of draft coverage. They have Greg Cosell on all the time. And he just, the whole group, they not only do they talk draft, but they talk draft from a standpoint of understanding the schematics of the game and understanding what these potential prospects fit into. And they kind of look at it through the lens of every NFL team. What kind of player are they looking for? That type of thing. So they did a quick 9-minute recap of the Packers draft, and it sparked a little bit of contract talk as well with Rashan Gary. And when I say with Rashan Gary, in regards to Rashan Gary's upcoming contract extension talks. And we'll hit on that and kind of crunch some numbers. But first things first here, we actually got a caller on the line. I believe this is Tim in Green Bay. Tim, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Clayton. How's it going?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Just got some coffee in me, was listening to a few of my favorite podcasts here on a Saturday morning and was like, you know what, man, I'm a little excited. I'm going to get on here and talk a little Packers. And I know this was very impromptu, man. You calling in. Appreciate you taking the time. How's things going in Green Bay?
It's going well, Clayton. It's funny. I was just doing the good old honey-do list. The wife's out of town, so I'm caulking the bathtub and I'm painting the window frame, and now I'm out in the garage, and I just happened to hear your alert on Twitter on my phone, and I figured I'd take a break and jump on. So things are going well up here, man. It was awesome to I know you touched on it at the beginning, but can't say enough about that podcast last night with Tony Mandarich, man. That was just powerful stuff, bigger than football, and you hit it on the head, man. Packer fans need to hear that. I wish we could get that played in Lambeau in front of 80,000 and just, it's amazing. It takes a big man to be able to speak candidly about your past failures and mistakes, and taking ownership of them shows complete progress. And I was really taken aback, man. It was a great show last night, brother.
I appreciate it, man. I really do. And again, I appreciate the kind words, and there's been a bunch of people reach out to me. The story is so powerful. Anyone could have done it. Anyone could have done that interview, and it was just trying to stay out of the way and let him tell his story. And you said it too right there, man. Everybody needs to hear that. They do, and I'm excited, man. We're going to get him back to Lambeau, and I know how that fan base is, man. That fan base. 90% of the Green Bay Packers fans would welcome him back with open arms, especially now knowing, not necessarily from this, but from the E60 special and all that ESPN did, just knowing, hey, this is a man who battled addiction and fought his way through it, and now he's on the backside, and I'm sure he's still not perfect. I know I'm the farthest thing from it. I tell people all the time, Tim, you want to see me, if you haven't seen me do something or say something stupid, hang around. It's coming. It's right around the corner. So, and that's the thing about life, man. It's just, I don't know, I don't want to get on a TED talk or anything, but it's just, learning, adapting, treating people right, and just trying to be a better version of yourself every day. That's why I don't criticize people for seeking alternate treatments for certain mental issues. I know a lot of veterans that have utilized, for lack of a better word, psychedelics. And don't get me wrong, I know there's people out there that abuse that too. There's people out there that are just looking to get, go on a trip and turn it into a more of a party thing rather than, hey, this is actual treatment. If someone had told me this 5 years ago, I'd say, nah, that's just an excuse. Someone's wanting to get high. And I experienced it with my brother firsthand. Now, he didn't go through that treatment, but seeing a VA doctor actually pull him to the side and go, hey, you might want to look into this. I know a ton of people it's helped. But again, everything isn't for everybody. And I just want to create a podcast where we come from a different angle and go, hey, look, nobody's perfect, man. Let's try to get through this, together and let's build people up, not tear each other down. Zane in the chat said, what's up? I made it to this live. Go Pack Go. What you got for us on this live stream? It's in the title there pretty much, Zane. We're gonna look at the draft class one last time before camp, and then also talk a little contract. But Tim, before I let you go, man, is there anything you wanted to talk about other than it could be something about the interview? That's totally cool. Before I let you go, what's on your mind, man?
Yeah, really, that's what's on my mind. It's like I said, it was a powerful pod last night, and there were a heavy dose of great quotes from Tony Mandrich throughout that interview. But one of the things that stuck out to me was he said it more than once. He touched on it, and he said, the Green Bay Packers gave him every opportunity to succeed. And it's kind of what I talk about, taking ownership for your mistakes and your actions. And he freely admitted that, he was in a different headspace. And I mean, if you look at him today and look at him then, I mean, he's a transformed person. He's a different person than he was back in 90 and 91. So I just think that it would be great, Clayton. We get him back for the draft. That's going to be huge. Like I said, I dropped a comment in that chat yesterday and said, I'll pay for the flight. And I was like 99% serious.
Oh no, dude. I immediately, my gears got to turning of, and from what I understand, he's got his own business now. He does photography and all kinds of other stuff. I think some stuff that's web based as well. But I immediately thought, Ryan's planning on going up for the draft, and Ryan was actually in a, I don't know what to say here. I guess a producer's chat, maybe, if you will, on the pod. He was actually listening to the entire interview. Ryan, being the person he is, he's like, I don't want to be involved with it. I just want to listen. Like, he's that type of guy that if he doesn't think, okay, I'm going to bring value to this situation, it's never about Ryan Schlip. It's always about what's best for the content, what's best for the pod. And that's what makes him a great leader of the Packernet Podcast Network. But he was the one who posted in that private chat and said, hey, draft. He just put draft. And I was like, oh, what a great idea. So how cool would it be, man, if if that's when he made it back? We've got us a place set up somewhere, around Lambeau Field. There in Green Bay, and we're doing some live broadcasting for him to drop in. That would be really, really cool. I know dinner would be on me, and whatever we got to do to make it happen, just to get him back in there. Because man, he hasn't been there since '92. He said. I mean, think about that.
Right.
When he left town, he was embarrassed. He was fighting addiction, all those things. He didn't, I shouldn't say that. He didn't say he was embarrassed. Maybe that's not the proper terminology, but he was fighting addiction. He was, trying to get his life together and just never looked back, and rightfully so. But now just hear the way he talks about Packer fans and the community. It's, I'm excited to see that happen, man, for sure.
During the draft too, it would be, how poignant would it be for him to tell his story while we have these young players in town and guys that are coming into the league and are facing the same pressures, if not greater pressures and more variables in today's game. These rookies need to hear Tony Mandrich's story. They absolutely do. And the NFL draft is perfect timing. I mean, kudos to you guys for doing this. And, like you said, Ryan just dropping that comment. I feel the same way. That's why I'm drawn to your content, guys, because a lot of times being involved in the conversation is great, but sometimes you got to just know when to sit back and just drink it all in, man.
Yeah, absolutely. If, it's one of the keys to life. I know anything I've ever accomplished, it had very, very little to do with me and more to do with, hey, that person's done that. What can I learn from them? Hey, maybe, I joke about this. So I had a fifth grade teacher, Tim, one time tell me, her name was Miss Scott, my favorite teacher to this day. She was very brash, straightforward. That I can work with people like that. But she said, hey, she called me Sweet Cheeks. She said, hey, Sweet Cheeks, why don't you let it bounce around that head of yours before it comes flying out of your mouth? And I'm telling you, it still sticks with me this day, whether it's business or friendships, marriage, anything. It's like, yeah, maybe you need to shut up for a second, dude, and just listen.
Exactly.
So,
And sometimes it's only a second or two. Sometimes you need to. Sometimes it's longer. It's an art form figuring out the timing of it all. And you're absolutely right, man. You can't really listen if your lips are flapping. So.
Absolutely. Well, man, I appreciate you calling in. It's always a blast to talk to you. One of the people I respect a whole lot, especially on Twitter. Just the way you engage and keep things positive. It's a rarity, and I don't take it lightly. But you stay on that honey-do list, because if you're like me, man, right now up until week 1, I'm trying to get as much credit with the wife as possible, because when football season happens, I want to, just like they talk about in training camp. What is it? They said, put it in the bank, talking about the work. That way you can cash it out later when you need it. That's going to be me week 1. It's going to be like, hey, come on, I've worked my tail off the last month and a half. It's time to watch some football. Just leave me alone.
Amen, brother. I couldn't agree more. Thanks for having me on, Clayton. I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. You have a great day, Tim.
You too. I'm going to jump off and listen. Thanks.
All right, buddy. Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right, that's Tim in Green Bay. He hops off. You guys can hop on. Obviously, we sent the link in the chat. If anybody else wants to jump on, it's totally cool. I'm going to get into some of this content. I know listeners are going, Clayton, I ain't here to hear TED Talks. I want to hear some Packers content. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of get into that. One of the things I wanted to do was, like I said, just kind of talk about this draft recap real quick before camp starts. We've done a recap before, but I love hearing other people's opinion. Just like last night with Tony, it's always awesome to just get other people's perspective. And these are guys that I respect a lot. I'm gonna go ahead and share the screen. For those of you on the pod, you can find this at Journey to the Draft. They've got a podcast that's real easy to find. Like I said, The Journey to the Draft is presented by Life Brand, and it's kind of an Eagles-based pod, but it's really, really good. I'm going to pause throughout this 9-minute clip and just kind of hit on some stuff that came to mind for me, and we'll go ahead and roll through it here. Let's get a quick recap, and like I said, it's going to spark a little Rashan Gary conversation as well.
Players to take bets on.
Let's go to the Green Bay Packers, a team that I know you're always watching pretty closely here. Their top choice after trading up with the Jets in the Aaron Rodgers deal, they take Iowa defensive lineman Lucas Van Ness. Why did Van Ness end up staying in the Midwest?
Well, certainly positional value is really important to this Packers team. Gutekunst and LaFleur, they're almost always going to go after the trenches in round 1, whether O-line, edge rusher, corner, one of those premier positions. So you kind of knew where they were going. And don't forget, we had to replace, Jerron Reed up front, replace Dean Lowry up front, some guys that are getting a little bit older on the back end, like Preston Smith and some players like that. So there was a need to retool the defensive line and get more impact players. So there's snaps to be had. I think finding a young, exciting, inside, outside, versatile player like Van Ness was important to this team. And for all intents for him, he just fits that Packer style. Iowa, he's really tough. He wants to go right through you. You want to call him that corn-fed type of guy. He just fits like a Packers pick. Maybe not the Brian Bulaga Iowa, but certainly an Iowa on the defensive side will fit right in as well.
He definitely felt like a Packers pick. That defense, they've got, what is it? They got to be close to double-digit first-round picks on that side of the ball now, right? In terms of who's playing in that too deep, I would think there's going to be pretty high expectations on that unit.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, Devontae Wyatt didn't play a lot as a rookie last year. He was a first-round pick. A lot of the attention on Quay Walker, the other first-round pick. Yep. They're going to need both those sophomores to take huge leaps in combination with a guy like Van Ness coming and performing right away, which you draft a guy in the top 15, there's a expectation for him to have an impact. So a lot of pressure on this Packers defense that kept Joe Barry despite all that talent from last year, and payday's coming up for Rashan Gary too. So this team has a lot going on as far as their transition. We're all talking about Jordan Love and the offense. Don't forget about this defense. There's a lot to talk about.
Rashan Gary, Jair Alexander, Darnell Savage, a first-round pick, Kenny Clark, a first-round pick, a lot of blue-chip talent there on that side of the ball.
All right, so let's pause there for a second. A couple of things he talked about was, taking a quote unquote premier position. You guys hear me worded a little bit different. I say, tier one position. I kind of break the position groups down into tiers and mainly just two top tiers. But in tier one, what you essentially have is quarterback, left tackle, edge, and interior defensive line. More primarily kind of that nose, someone who can play a nose to a three, can move around. Your J.J. Watt type, your Aaron Donald type, these guys that are so versatile, so talented, they can move around on the defensive line. That type of stuff, I think, is really, really important in today's NFL, where you can push the pocket. Edge defender is still extremely important. Obviously, it's a tier one position in my opinion. And I'm pretty sure we have a track record now across the NFL that people are willing to spend the most money and use the most draft capital on these edge positions, but also pushing that pocket from inside is absolutely huge. Playing the run on your way to the quarterback as far as rushing the quarterback. And when you look at it, that's what they did. They went with Lucas Van Ness, right? What did they do last year, guys? They went with Devontae Wyatt, another one of those tier one positions of importance. What did they do that sparked the big controversy with Aaron Rodgers? They drafted Jordan Love. Why? Because it's such an important position. It's that tier one position of importance. And they seen at the time that, hey, this guy can sit behind Rodgers the same way that Rodgers sat behind Favre. And that gives us the best opportunity to kind of mold him into the quarterback that we want for the future, right? But with Lucas Van Ness, they said, is he going to play inside? You didn't hear them mention what I talked about Greg Cosell saying. And I went back and listened to it. It doesn't sound like Greg Cosell got the information from within the Green Bay Packers building, but he read an article that was written by a local Packers reporter. He didn't say who, that they're playing him more on the outside. And of course, Greg Cosell, who's on this podcast quite a bit, The Journey to the Draft, they've got a real close knit relationship. He mentioned, I thought he would be better on the inside, right? So I guess we shouldn't put a pin in that just yet, because we've also heard the Packers organization say they could see him playing kind of that Zadarius Smith role where he's standing up, roaming a little bit and kind of attacking that A gap. Guys, that's absolutely huge. Even if you're still just bringing four and dropping one off the edge, almost like that old school Dom Capers fire zone blitz type look, right? Where, you're showing four on the front, and let's say you've got Van Ness roaming in that A gap. He blitzes, right, and attacks that A gap and puts that extra pressure on the middle of the pocket, and then have one of the outside edge guys drop into coverage, whether it's a healthy Gary or a Preston Smith. And some of you guys are going, no more Preston Smith in coverage. I understand what you're saying, but when you can apply pressure right in the quarterback's lap, when you're not playing a mobile quarterback, it really is the key to defeating a pocket passer, in my opinion. So, that's what they said about that. They mentioned Wyatt and Walker in their sophomore campaigns. They need to take a step. It's 100% correct, in my opinion. Quay Walker has got to play a lot better. I know a lot of people seen the tackle numbers and they think, oh, he's just a stud. Guys, when you watch the tape, he was lost quite a bit. He was. There's many times that he was fooled on read options. He was, not schematically sound. He's got all the talent in the world. PFF suggests he's great at pass coverage. That's awesome, because he does have that physical ability, right? That what am I trying to say here? Those physical traits that you want in a linebacker in coverage, but also you got to play smart within the run gap scheme. So I think that's something that's gonna need to improve tremendously for this defense to take the next step. He was a person, in my opinion, that last year he struggled a little bit. Now the tackles are great. Don't get me wrong. You've seen him attack the ball. I don't know how many times you guys heard me talk on the postgame show about, this guy, when he gets to the ball, he gets there violent. And it's something that we need in Green Bay, because it's kind of been lacking in the past. I think Devondre Campbell will have a bounce back year. Obviously, he had a great year the year before, took a little bit of a step back. A lot of people don't like to mention that he battled through the injuries, but that is definitely something that played a role in those struggles. And then, of course, Devontae Wyatt, you guys have heard us say many times on this pod, and Ryan mentioned it as well. It seems like he had a good year. He graded out well with PFF. When we've seen him on the field, you've seen the athleticism, you've seen him being able to chase plays, you've seen him, with the quick spin move, with the quick finesse moves inside, and being able to create pressure on the quarterback. He just didn't have a whole lot of opportunities. When I say a whole lot, comparatively speaking, I think he had over 200 opportunities, if I remember correctly. But this year, I think you're going to see a lot more of Devontae Wyatt, and I'm really, really excited to see that unfold for sure. Here in the chat, we got Zane. I hope Wyatt is ready to step up this year. Kenny needs to help out their dude. Be getting double teamed every play last season. Kenny does see a lot of double teams. And, I heard somebody say the other day, Zane, I'm trying to remember who it was. It was a pod I was listening to. Might have been Wildy, might have been Homer, one of those guys. But they were talking about how this is probably the best defensive lineman to play alongside Kenny. Now, immediately I thought Mike Daniels. But again, Mike Daniels, it's not like Mike Daniels had an all-pro career, right? I mean, I think we would all agree he didn't. He was a good defensive lineman. If Wyatt lives up to that first-round talent expectation with the flashes we seen last year and now getting more opportunities, maybe he will begin to draw a little more attention, whether it's a halfback chipping him as opposed to, helping inside with Kenny, or maybe it draws a double team to Wyatt every now and again away from Kenny, and Kenny can get more opportunities to get to the quarterback. But, like we talked about before, it's more about the run defense was more the liability than anything else. I'm going to hit play here just to make sure I didn't miss this, but Rashan Gary, I want to talk about his contract, and it kind of sparked that conversation. Maybe they just mentioned Gary. Let me make sure they're beyond that point real quick.
When you look at the Packers haul overall, I want to ask you about the biggest surprise, but real quick for our listeners, I'll just roll through their picks here.
Okay, never mind. They're just getting on the picks. Cool. So when they talked about Rashan Gary just a second ago, and they talked about, this is a contract year for him, kind of got me thinking like, okay, what is that going to look like? Now, much like Elton Jenkins last year, and this may be a good timeline for us. If you guys remember, Elton Jenkins battling through the injury, wasn't completely healthy, and they got the contract done, which told me they feel like, okay, he's going to be able to fully recover. Let's go ahead and pay him. Now, at the time, I wasn't completely on board with the Elton Jenkins contract because it seemed a little high for an interior offensive lineman, but like we've talked about in the past, they may see him as a tackle moving forward. He may be the right tackle this year. They may see him as the future left tackle as Bach moves on, whether it's next year or 2 or 3 years after that, right? Depending on whether or not they get him a contract extension. So when you look at it from that perspective, that's going to be a cheap left tackle or a cheap right tackle if Elton Jenkins does make that move. Now, I think we would all agree in a perfect world, Tom can play right tackle. Bach's one of the best left tackles when healthy in the entire league. Let's keep Elton at left guard, right? That's probably the game plan going into this year. I just don't want to see this musical chairs aspect of the offensive line. That's something I do not want to have to deal with this year. So when you look at the contract, we go to Spotrac, and Spotrac basically says that you can look at their fair market value, kind of like, okay, here's what the market suggests they are worth. And it's a really cool formula they use because they take like the top 4 or 5 most recent contract extensions at that position. They compare the statistics, the quote unquote production, and say, okay, here's what we think he's worth in comparison to these top 4 or top 5 guys, right? One, I think could have technically been an interior defensive lineman. And I think the other 3 were actually edge defenders, one of which was TJ Watt. So TJ Watt, in my opinion, is kind of that example we have to go off of, okay? So when you break it down in that perspective, Spotrac on a 4-year contract, now, if they feel really good about Gary's knee, they may be a player that they go 6 or 7 years. Who knows, right? Typically quarterbacks are the positions that they do that, or someone that's a, quote unquote generational talent type player gets those really long contracts. I think 4 is a good base to just kind of go off of, and that's what Spotrac did. They're predicting that his market value is 4 years, $104 million, which averages out to roughly $26 million per year. And they didn't have the guaranteed money listed. So what I did was hopped over to TJ Watt's contract. He signed a contract in 2022, 4 years, $112 million. Now, keep in mind inflation. I know with the economy, nobody wants to hear the word inflation, right? But it's one of those things that he signed that contract in 2022. We're now signing a contract extension in 2023. The bar always kind of gets upped, and according to Spotrac, they are compensating for that. But what I wanted to get was the percentage of guaranteed money with TJ Watt, and then we could tack on that percentage to the $104 million 4-year deal worth $26 million per year. So in TJ Watt's contract, to the best of my knowledge, it was 4 years, $112 million, average of $28 million per, and he got $80 million fully guaranteed. Okay. So now that guarantee may be in roster bonus. It may be in signing bonus. There's different ways that they can kind of form up that quote unquote fully guaranteed, right? So when you take that into consideration, that's 71% of the total contract. So he got a 71% guarantee on that $112 million based on 4 years. Now, I think he could have got more money, but they said TJ Watt absolutely ran his agent out of the room and said, I want to talk to ownership. I want to get this deal done before camp. Okay. Or maybe it was even during camp when it was going on. So there's some people out there going, well, Clayton, Rashan Gary's not going to do that. He's not going to run his agent out of the room and make it a little bit more friendly for the ball club, this and that. Why do I mention that? Rashan Gary is his own agent. Okay. Now, some of you guys are going, whoa, we seen how that went with Lamar Jackson. His mom was his agent, and that's not a good thing. But look at how Rashan Gary carries himself. Look at how much Rashan Gary loves Green Bay. Look at you can tell he is 110% all in for his teammates, his coaching staff. He loves everything about Green Bay. His hashtag, put cheese on everything, right? He wants to be in Green Bay. So I don't think it's unrealistic to look at it from this perspective and go, I could see him taking a similar approach to TJ Watt as opposed to shut up and talk to my agent. I don't have anything to say to you. To the best of my knowledge, Gary is still his representative, his own representative. So if you broke down that percentage, 71% of the contract, that means that the guaranteed money would be $73 million for Rashan Gary. So what we're looking at, according to Spotrac, a projected potential contract for Rashan Gary based off of the production in comparison to the top 4 or 5 at his position, and making those deductions and going, okay, here's where we think he falls in 2023. Okay, their prediction isn't based off of, okay, this is just from 2022. They're simply saying this is what we think it will be in 2023. With that 71%, what I see a potential contract extension looking like for Rashan Gary would be 4 years, $104.2 million, averaging roughly $26 million per, with $73 million in guaranteed money. Some people hear guaranteed money and they get nervous. I like it personally because what it does with the way the structure of those bonuses is it allows you to maneuver that money around a little bit, right? Yes, that money is due at the time, but you can spread that out over the duration of the contract. You can backload it. You can front load it. It gives you a lot more flexibility rather than a franchise tag. Some people say, oh, I'm not really worried about the contract extension. We can just franchise tag him. There's nobody else on the roster we want to franchise tag. The problem with that is it's much more difficult to move that money around and manipulate the cap in this cash over cap game. So if the Packers make the playoffs this year, right, let me give you 2 scenarios. Let's say they come out and surprise people and they win 10 or 11 games and they make the playoffs, right? Then you feel like your roster is built from a standpoint of, hey, look, we're competing, right? Let's continue to build through the draft. And then what you could do is try to absorb some of that Rashan Gary cap hit early, meaning when you go into the 2024 offseason, you can go, okay, we like where our roster sits. Let's go ahead and pay some of this bill right now. You actually seen that with Elton Jenkins last year. For all the people that were kicking and screaming, saying they're kicking the can down the road, they're ruining the future, and on and on and on, every one of those doom and gloomers failed to mention that they actually absorbed a little bit of that hit with Elton Jenkins last year when they really didn't have to. So now you've got a similar contract extension on a similar timeline with Rashan Gary possibly getting an extension before week 1. If they do work out that extension, then I could see them doing something similar because we're still under the cap and they can maneuver things around to, like I said, if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like this team can compete, then take a little bit of that hit early, right? Because you're not going to go crazy in free agency next year. Now, let's say you miss the playoffs. I know nobody wants to hear it. You don't want to hear it any more than I want to say it. I promise you. But let's say you do miss the playoffs, right? Now you can backload that a touch and try to go out in free agency and shop a little bit. Again, why are you allowed to do that? That $73 million is going to be something that you can kind of maneuver around and manipulate the cap a little bit. Even tack on some voidable years because Rashan Gary is going to be here for the foreseeable future if indeed that knee is as healthy as we think it is. So I just wanted to throw that in there, kind of stay on topic, because as they hit on the defense, they mentioned Rashan Gary's contract, and I thought, I wonder what that's going to look like. That's why we went ahead and did it. So let's move on to the rest of this pod and get back to the draft talk.
in this draft. They take Van Ness in the first round. They come back with 3 day 2 selections. Luke Musgrave, the tight end from Oregon State, Jaden Reed, the senior receiver from Michigan State, and then another tight end there in Tucker Kraft, the tight end from South Dakota State. So 3 state schools getting some love there from Green Bay on day 2. And then on day 3.
All right. So with the tight ends, he mentioned actually,
I got a handful of picks here.
So,
Colby Wooden, the defensive lineman from Auburn, a very versatile player. Sean Clifford, the quarterback from Penn State. Dontavian Wicks, wide receiver from Virginia. Carl Brooks, the defensive tackle from Bowling Green. Anders Carlson, the kicker from Auburn. Carrington Valentine, a corner who declared early for the draft from Kentucky. Lou Nichols, the running back from Central Michigan. Anthony Johnson, a decorated player, a safety from Iowa State. And then the final one, Grant Dubose, the wide receiver from Charlotte. So laying out all of those picks there, Ben. We're talking about close to double-digit selections here for the Packers in this draft. Biggest surprise when you look at the haul overall?
Well, it wasn't a surprise with a double dip on tight ends. I think there was a clear need and intent to address that position, not bringing back Mercedes Lewis, letting Tunyon go to Chicago in free agency. That Y and U tight end in LaFleur's offense, very important. So not so much a surprise. I think they did get put on high alert when Sam Laporta went before Michael Mayer, and there was that early run. They knew they had to go get guys. But the biggest surprise to me was seeing Jaden Reed go 50th overall.
Yeah.
A guy I had a huge crush on, but I didn't see a lot of pecking orders that had him go over Jalen Hyatt, the Blitnikoff winner, over Josh Downs, who is an exciting gadget player. Even guys like Marvin Mims and Tank Dell got a little bit more steam late in the process. I love Jaden Reed. I had him as a day 2 player. I just did not see him going 50th overall, but I'm excited he ended up being a Packer, and I expect him to be an impact player right away.
So what's your sense on why he was the pick over those other guys?
I just think he fits the Packers style of wanting a 3-level threat from the Big Ten. He's played outdoors. He has a toughness to him. He's a competitive player. He tested really well. He showed up at the Senior Bowl, was really competitive in nearly every facet down there. I just think he was a emerging, more complete player than some of those other guys I had listed, from the Hyatts, the Dells, the Mims, the Downs, which we all know kind of their highs and lows and their traits and what their issues are. And just think, once you started looking at the landscape receiver, he was a safer pick in there. And not only safer, was more exciting and had a lot more impact potential, in my opinion. So he was a guy that kind of flirted just a little under the radar in that next wave of receivers, not knowing where he stood with the Rashid Rice's of the world and, that next kind of tier. But 50th overall was right on the money on my board. And I had him as a fringe top 50 player through most of the process. So I just wasn't sure if a team was going to pull the trigger that early.
Yeah, they talked a lot. They do this consistently whenever they talk about receiver with this profile, but receivers with return ability, that's been going back to when Ron Wolf was there. Yeah. That's something that they always kind of, give a little bit of a bump to, just because of what that player can do, not special teams wise, but yards after catch wise. It's like, yeah, this is a guy that has the ability to be a playmaker. He's got that kick return and more notably the punt return experience. And that's something Jaden Reed has done at a high level throughout his career, both at Michigan State and also at Western Michigan earlier in his career. I guess double dipping at tight end on day 2, they took Musgrave and then they came back and took Kraft. They said basically they had a really high grade on Kraft, and so they came in and they've lost a bunch of guys in free agency. Mercedes Lewis, I believe, still unsigned. They lose Tunyon to Chicago, so clearly some holes there in that position room, but it'll be interesting to see how all of those guys kind of fit in together. It wouldn't shock me if Kraft ended up making more of an impact early on as opposed to Musgrave.
Yeah, I think Kraft's going to fill into that Mercedes Lewis role, have his hand in the turf a little bit more, block a little bit more. He's closer to that 260-pound wide tight end. I think Musgrave has that seam stretch ability, that vertical element, the pass game element that's going to fill into that Robert Tunyon role. So neither of them are a pure one-for-one replacing those incumbent guys, but just trying to figure out where they kind of line. But don't forget, Musgrave, obviously from that Oregon State offense, he blocked a lot as well.
He did go through day 3 early impact players. For me, I'm going to go with that.
All right, so let's pause a second. Tight end. He talked about Laporta kind of started the tight end run early. And you guys know that when we were sitting here on draft night, I was a big Michael Mayer guy. I had him as my top tight end. Laporta was right there with him. And the question was, when are they going to start flying off the board? Now, in the mocks that I did on my episodes, I don't do mock drafts to try to go, hey, look, I can predict what's going to happen. I do mock drafts as exercises going, what different scenarios are going to unfold. And the reason I do that's because NFL teams actually do that. The history of the mock draft, there was actually a guy, I don't know his name right off the bat, but he used to do a mock draft every year, and he had all the information on all the prospects. And he would do it from a standpoint of like, hey, look, this is a hobby of mine, but then it became this kind of this product that he could sell to the draft, the fans of the draft, and kind of use it from a business standpoint. Well, teams caught wind, and they said every NFL general manager had that mock draft in their front office, in their draft rooms, and they trusted the information that much because at the time they didn't have this huge database. They didn't have the internet and how you could get access to so many scouting reports and things right off the bat. They had the old ice pick filing system. We ain't going to get into all that. I'm trying not to grin. You could probably hear me smiling right now, but just some of the stuff that those front offices had to do to be as effective as possible in putting together and constructing rosters, whether it was through the draft, free agency, or whatever, even before free agency, just trying to find talent that no one knew about. But they would use that mock draft. That's the approach I take with the mock drafts. I don't do it to go, hey, look, here's what I think is going to happen, or hey, look how smart I am. Guys, self-edification is people repellent. And I'm telling you, there is plenty of it going on Twitter, social media, everywhere. It's constantly, I told you this. When I come from a standpoint of, hey, look, we predicted this, it's not like, look how good we are. It's like, hey, we're starting to figure out the formula here, right? We're starting to see the tendencies. And we want Packers Total Access, this podcast, to come from a perspective almost like we're within the building. We're trying to figure out, what are the Packers thinking? What is LaFleur thinking in putting the game plan together? What's Goody thinking in scouting and that whole process and putting themselves in a position to have all the information to make the best draft picks based off of the current roster? What is Russ Ball looking to do with these contract extensions? How's it going to be structured? Is it going to be front loaded, back loaded? They're going to be voidable years. Are we going all in on cash over cap? Are we backing off now that Rodgers is gone? All these things we want to kind of get into that mindset of the front office. That was the whole purpose of this podcast. But when you kind of look at what they did, we seen early on when doing the mock drafts that our best shot is early in the second round. We talked about that over and over and over on the pod, that I think they're going to try to get a tight end there early in the second. I didn't personally think they were going to double dip, although in a couple of mock drafts I double dipped. But I'm just thinking, I don't know, man. They don't seem to put that much value on the tight end position. Lo and behold, they did. So when Laporta went off the board, then Michael Mayer, that run started. I think they, just like the guys said on this podcast, The Journey to the Draft, they were like, all right, we got to get aggressive with tight end, because we knew that the talent was going to drop off after Tucker Kraft, right? There might have been a couple guys. I don't have my draft board pulled up, my spreadsheet right now, but you could tell they were very high on those two guys. Now, I'm not as big on Tucker Kraft as most people. I know we love to joke about him and how he's very outgoing. You've seen him chugging beers with David Bakhtiari. He looks like he's going to be a Packer through and through. I hope I'm wrong in that regard. When I looked at his tape, I wasn't as impressed as I was with Luke Musgrave. But you got to understand there are two different types of tight ends, right? And they kind of mentioned that. They talked about that they think Tucker Kraft is going to play that Mercedes Lewis role, right? Which is the Y tight end, that he's going to be attached. Now, there's some cases that you flex the Y out, but when you go to a 12 personnel, one running back, two tight ends, now you have that second tight end who's playing the Y, who's typically attached, you're kind of playing that wing, who's playing the F, which is typically split out wide as a wide receiver, and also a U is what they referred to it. And you heard the guy say that U tight end in this LaFleur offense. And from the best of my knowledge, Bill O'Brien, when he was with the Houston Texans, started referring to his tight ends as the F tight end and the U tight end, FU. We know Bill O'Brien's got a temper. His nickname in New England was Billy Teapot for a reason. They said he was constantly boiling over, and he kind of threw that little spin on it. Now, that U reference may go back way further than Bill O'Brien. I don't know. What I want people to understand on this pod, this is where you can get lost in the X's and O's. This is where you can get lost in the terminology. You guys heard me. I said over and over, I prefer the old archaic style of calling a play where you read off the numbers, the 989. Right. And that's determining a 9 route, an 8 route, a 9 route, as opposed to all of these nicknames that have come about for these different passing concepts, these different route combinations. right? And it's, if you prefer to use the route combinations, that's cool. If you prefer to use the numerical system, that's cool. If you prefer to call that tight end an F tight end when someone else might call him a U tight end, don't get bogged down and caught up into that you're wrong, I'm right type of argument, because that's when you drift away from what the tape's actually showing. That's when you drift away from actually learning what are they trying to accomplish here. The main thing you need to understand with the Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave draft picks is Tucker Kraft most likely will play that Y tight end, which is going to be attached, hand in the dirt, 3-point stance, blocking, and that Mercedes Lewis role, right? Musgrave is going to be flexed out more like we've seen Tunyon. There was many times that they were in 12 personnel, and you've seen Rodgers, both tight ends, one tight end was attached, the other was flexed out wide. When you put Luke Musgrave, who was clocked at over 20 mile an hour at the Senior Bowl in pads, right? When you flex him out wide, I don't see him as a tight end. I see him as a wide receiver. And that's exciting because if he can block, what you can now do in some cases is come out and show a spread look. Let's say you don't have Tucker Kraft or Josiah DeGuara. I wouldn't rule out Josiah DeGuara playing Y a lot this year either. But, a lot of people are kind of overlooking that and just assuming Tucker Kraft's going to do it. But whoever's in that Y, let's say he's just in a wing look, right, on one side, and you've got Luke Musgrave spread out wide. Once you attack them a few times like that, now the defense adjusts and they go, okay, when 88 comes on the field from here on out, we're treating them like a wide receiver. So when they go to their quote-unquote 12 personnel, we're going to go to our nickel. All of a sudden, Matt LaFleur picks up on that, and now we come out in that wide set. We motion him back in, or shift, I should say, back to a tight formation. Guess what? Now from the inside out in a tight formation, you have the advantage in the running game because they're in a nickel set. There's a corner or a big nickel safety that's going to be, designated to kind of cover Luke Musgrave. Well, now you've got the weight advantage in the running game. There's a lot of things you can do with that. Immediately people think Musgrave's fast. We're going to use him in the passing game, and absolutely. But it's going to take you establishing that a couple of times and saying, hey, he's a real threat. He's a real weapon. Not suggesting he's going to be Hall of Fame material. It's way too early to even talk about him being a good player, much less a great player. But if he does mold himself into that kind of player that can play like a Gronk flexed out, like a Kelsey flexed out, a Goddard, some of these really good tight ends, now you've got teams on their heels going, how are we going to attack this? That's very exciting to me. One of the other players he talked about was Jaden Reed. You guys know I did the Chalk Talk segment. I've been very transparent about this. My goal was to talk about when it came to Jaden Reed. I was looking at going, okay, if I can find 5 plays, I'll be happy with this. Guys, I could only narrow it down to 16 plays from Jaden Reed, especially from 2021. I keyed in on 2021, and if you guys are draft nuts, make sure you make a note of this. The Packers are really, really high on a previous year game tape. So find those players that really performed well the year before and maybe had a down year. They think they get really good quality because really good, bang for their buck when it comes to those draft picks, because what they're seeing with these players is that was their ceiling. That was their ceiling in college. We can get that out of them. And right now, their stock is down. I don't know if you guys dabble in the stock market. I'm not suggesting you should. But if you understand how it operates, you may look at a product or look at a stock and go, okay, I'd like to invest in that, but right now it's extremely high. I'm going to wait and buy it on the dip, right? And what it means is the 1 year, the 5 year track record is showing this thing is on a steady incline. But right now, it's dropping in value. Let me buy it at the low point so I can maximize when it turns back up. That's kind of what the Packers have been doing. What are the 2 best examples for that? In my opinion, the 2 best examples are Jaden Reed this year, but also Jordan Love. Jordan Love, when he came out, guys, if he had come out the year before or, had the type of year he did his junior year or whatever year it was the year before he came out on this draft, then they would, you're talking about a lot of value skyrocketing with Jordan Love. But what do? They caught him on a year where they changed offensive coordinators. He threw a lot of interceptions. Been a lot of talk about that here lately, that all of a sudden Jordan Love's not going to be able to succeed because he threw interceptions his senior year. That just cracks me up. But what did the Packers do? They kind of bought him low, right? If he had had a phenomenal year and took a step forward, he probably would have been a top 3 pick. But instead he had a bad year, so the Packers bought low and were looking to maximize on that investment. And I'm just telling you right now, the fact that they were willing to move on from Aaron Rodgers says a lot. Whether you agree with the move or not, whether I agree with the move or not, the one thing we can't deny is that Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur seen something in Jordan Love that they said, that's the guy we're going to be willing to move on from Aaron from. Now, their minds may have changed a little bit. The 2-year contract tells me they're giving him a fair shake, a fair shot at leading this team. And that's just another example of how they bought low. They did that with Jaden Reed. And what the guys talked about with Jaden Reed was the same thing I seen on tape in that 16-play saturation of Chalk Talk that we did. He's a 3-level player. People immediately thought that's going to be our slot receiver. That's going to be our slot receiver. And he may be the slot receiver, right? And that's totally cool. For as much 11 personnel is played in the NFL, you've got to have a good slot receiver to be effective, right? But what I seen on tape was this dude played X, this dude played Y, this dude played Z. We broke it down, and I had literally, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I had it broken down like he was, of these 16 plays, 5 snaps were at Z, 3 were in the slot. 7 were in the X. This one, he was in the backfield. They moved him around a lot. He can play at all 3 levels, and that's what they were looking for. They're looking for players that can be effective at all 3 levels. What do I mean by 3 levels? Pitch. Let's just give you 3 routes here, okay? Let's give you a 9 route, which is a go. That's a deep, hey, run to the Buick, I'll throw it to you. If you've seen Any Given Sunday, you know exactly what I'm referencing. That go route, right? Or even a post route where, the guy's planning on catching the ball 35 yards down the field, the second window of a post route. Then you've got the medium level where it might be a 10-yard dig, right? It might be a Dino, a shake, whatever. And 10 yards down the field, you're crossing over the middle. Or it might be a 10-yard out route, right? That's that medium level. And then you got the shallow crosses, the quick slants, the smoke routes, things like that underneath. They seen on tape, these guys, they being the Journey to the Draft guys, seen the same exact thing I seen on tape. This guy can attack all 3 levels, and he can play all 3 positions when it comes to wide receiver. X, boundary X, he can play Z, he can play slot, right? So that's kind of what I seen with him. And they also had, it sounded like they also had Jalen Hyatt higher than Jaden Reed. This makes me feel vindicated and makes me feel a lot better because on draft night, you guys know Jalen Hyatt was my top receiver. And when they traded back the first time, I went, there's somebody they like in their top tier of talent right now at a position of need, but they don't think anyone else is on them, right? I'm thinking, this is Jalen Hyatt. Why is Jalen dropping a little bit? They trade back, right? Comes up again. I go, this has got to be Jalen Hyatt. They traded back again, and I go, whoa, okay, it's not Jalen Hyatt. It's who in the heck are they going after? Lo and behold, it was Jaden Reed. Now, you heard those guys say they had him right around that spot in the 50 spot, right? Me personally, I had him a little bit lower because what was I doing? Going off the 2022 tape. And big no-no. But Packers are showing this track record that be willing to go back at least 2 years to grade someone and say, okay, what is their peak? What is their ceiling? All right, that's actually their ceiling, not 2022. Jaden Reed's ceiling is actually 2021. That's much higher than 2022. That's where I went off the cuff. And you can bet your rear end, those are in the notes for the spreadsheet next draft, is be aggressive at looking at the 2022 tape now for the 2024 draft. If that makes sense. So I'm excited about Jaden Reed. Again, though, it just made me feel a little bit better because I beat myself up. Ryan was laughing about it. I'm like, man, how in the heck did I miss this Jaden Reed? These guys, it kind of caught them off guard a little bit as well, although one still did have them in the 50s range there. So they definitely seen the ceiling and went after it. All right, let's move along to the day 2 draft picks here, and let's see what they got to say about some of these guys on the backside.
First one on day 3, Colby Wooden.
Yep.
Ben, I swear I said this to you in like February or January. It was the time when I had just gotten done rewatching Colby Wooden because I watched him in the summer off of his redshirt sophomore tape and then watched him again as a redshirt junior. And, again, it was like post Senior Bowl, pre-combine. I was like, Colby Wooden just kind of like feels like a Packers defensive lineman. They've drafted guys like, the Montravius Adams of the world. Obviously, he was another guy from Auburn, but like he had that same kind of like versatile skill set. And I was like, he just feels like a guy that would be a good fit there in Green Bay. And lo and behold, he ends up there with the Packers.
He was a guy that flashed as a true freshman at Auburn. I was like, whoa, this guy's going to be a first-round pick. I think I was watching Jacoby McLean or somebody, Smoke Monday, somebody behind him and just kept looking at number 25. But then the next year, he'd be a stand-up outside linebacker. And then the next year, he's like a one-tech. And in any game, you could find him playing up and down the line, very much like Carl Brooks, who they took, out of Bowling Green, who a lot of people wanted to go to the combine, kind of an awkward 300-pound defensive end that can play up and down the line. Both those guys, I think, can have some early impact. But my vote, Anthony Johnson Jr., Iowa State. I think this guy's going to eventually be a starter. Could be day one, week one, taking over that Adrian Amos role. Wow. This kid's tough. Excellent top-down instincts in that cover 4 kind of quarter scheme where you're playing the run first. Good play ID, good tackling, really, really tough. I think he played corner early on, so he has some instincts with the ball in the air, but this kid is fearless, and I don't think people are realizing the turnover at safety with this Packers team. I think Savage is eventually on his way out, despite them picking up the 5th-year option. Like I had mentioned, Adrian Amos not back with the team this year. Rudy Ford, they did bring back. There's some snaps to be had and some dust to kind of settle on the back end. So I can absolutely see Anthony Johnson Jr. taking that spot very early in his Packers career.
Johnson Jr. has a very similar kind of profile. They're different players, but similar kind of profile to Reed Blankenship. And then he's like a 4 or 5 year starter, posted a ton of production. He's played a ton of football for Iowa State. Let's now get to our next category here with the Green Bay Packers. Just big picture. Any other takeaways from looking at this draft haul, Ben?
No, I think, they took a lot of players in their neck of the woods, as I like to say. They took the South Dakota State tight end. They took the receiver from Michigan State, the safety from Iowa State, the D lineman from Iowa. A lot of their early draft capital was those Midwest type of players, which I think is important. You want guys that are comfortable in the cold, comfortable outdoors. They're going to get weather up in Green Bay and Chicago. Enjoy the comfortable domes in Minnesota and Detroit. But Midwest guys are important to those types of clubs. And I always go back to teams like the Steelers and Mike Tomlin telling us the story of deciding between Eddie Lacy and Le'Veon Bell. And Eddie Lacy had never played a game under 60 degrees, never played a game above the Mason-Dixon line. Le'Veon was a slopper and a mutter out there in Michigan State. So that type of stuff matters. And I think the Packers took a lot of Packers types of picks, in my opinion, in this draft.
Love it. Love it. I just think that's great draft analysis. I think those guys did a phenomenal job. I'm going to hit on the chat here in just a second, guys. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us. So what did they say there? Talking about Wooden, right? Colby Wooden, defensive lineman. This is a guy that's played everywhere. Now, in my opinion, he's a little too big to play outside linebacker for the Packers. It doesn't mean he couldn't do it in a pinch. I think they're going to beef him up a little bit and use him on the interior. Now, they said he's very versatile, right? He flashed as a freshman. They were talking about looking at juniors and seniors for the upcoming draft. These guys, during the summertime, they dig in on basically prospect footage, right? They want to get. I couldn't tell you how many times I heard Greg Cosell and these guys talk on the current draft for 2023 going, yeah, I watched him last summer. I did him last summer, his profile. I remember. So they take this downtime in the summer, which is freaking brilliant, and go, all right, let's comb through last year's college footage. Let's look at some of these top prospects, right? These are things we can be doing as fans during this dead time rather than complaining, right? And having to argue with idiots like Colin Cowart and all these guys that are they're trying to throw stuff out there just to get people triggered and reaction. Don't get me wrong. If you like that kind of content, that's great. Me personally, I'm kind of digging into, all right, what are some of the things that I can be learning, right? What can we learn about these prospects coming up in the upcoming college football season? I was actually going to go to Ryan and ask him what he thought about the idea of me doing a college football podcast for the Packernet podcast. Because there's just so much information there that kind of leads into the Packers' upcoming season. So if that's some content you guys might be interested in, shoot him a message, let him know. But Wooden, very versatile, flashed as a freshman, right? He played a 5-tech. He played a 3-tech. He played a wide 9 technique. He played a 1-tech all over the offensive line. Of course, the wide 9 being when he played outside linebacker. I think that probably hurt him a little bit as far as production. But they seen when just – an organization, just a program being willing to try a defender at all those multiple positions, right? That says a lot about the player in itself. Now you look at the production. Now you look at schematically, how did he perform in those specific spots? I think Colby Wooden might be a player to kind of keep an eye on. I wouldn't be surprised. And they've hit on defensive linemen late in the draft before. Mike Daniels kind of comes to mind. Can't remember exactly where he was drafted. I'm pretty sure he wasn't a first or a second rounder, but Mike Daniels kind of developed into a decent defensive lineman. That's not out of the realm of possibility when it comes to trying to get depth and trying to get production on the interior of the defensive line. You never know which one of these guys is just going to click and they're going to go. I mean, Tony Mandarich last night we had on the pod, right? That's a guy everybody likes to say, oh, he's the biggest bust in history. He's horrible, this and that. Now you go and watch that E60 and look at some of the footage of the general managers, the coaches across the entire National Football League who are like, that's the slam dunk pick. But like the Dallas Cowboys, but Troy Aikman, we need a quarterback, right? But yeah, Barry Sanders shows a lot of flash, but don't know if he's the guy. Deion Sanders, man, he's electric, right? No, Tony Mandarich, that's the one that's a slam dunk. That dude's going to be phenomenal. And then, of course, personal issues, addiction, things like that. But you never know how things are going to unfold, right? Just like you never know that with those top picks. You don't know it with the later round picks either, right? Do I need to mention Tom Brady? You know what I'm saying? And I know it's the exception, not the rule, and I get all that, but you never know when these guys are going to spark. Now, the other guy they mentioned was Anthony Johnson Jr. I have really shut up about Anthony Johnson Jr. because I feel like people are laughing under their breath at me when I say, I don't know, man, he was pretty high on my board, right? When they made that pick, I said, that's a quality pick. He wasn't my top safety, but he was right there in the same tier. And I'm like, that's a good pick. And then when I started to mention, hey, man, why can't he play safety, right? Why can't he come on the scene? Well, he's a late round pick. Don't kid yourself. That's the guy you're going to fall in love with. And I literally got beat into the corner like a puppy. It was just like, okay, maybe I'm being a fanboy here. Hearing them talk about Anthony Johnson Jr. really, it took me back to when I was looking at him and compiling my draft board going, man, this guy right here, there's so many things that just sparked in my mind. Like this guy kind of feels like he could be a solid safety. Probably not year one, maybe not year two, but he's someone who could develop into a starting safety. And some of the things they talked about, they actually said they wouldn't be surprised if he could start week one as a starting safety, that Adrian Amos role. Now, what role is that? You guys know I've talked about this Fangio-style Joe Barry defense. The safeties are very interchangeable within the Fangio defense. No longer do you have strong and free safety. You've really got two safeties that, for the most part, are going to show they're not going to sugar anything pre-snap. They're going to show two on the shelf, and they're going to play the run first, and they're going to play what they call top down, right? Top down, meaning from playing on the shelf in that deep two-high look, right? With even it's really a four-high look because your corners are playing off the line of scrimmage. If you don't believe me, go ask Packer fans because that's all you heard about when it came to the Joe Barry defense last year, right? Was everybody was complaining how the corners played off the line. Well, that's the Fangio defense, right? I want to say this. I kind of come across like a Joe Barry apologist. That's not my intent. I just watched the tape and seen, especially in the run defense, so many times, guys, Adrian Amos would come screaming down with that top-down look, right, and miss the tackle. Savage missing tackles. All these, when I turned on the tape, I didn't go, the scheme's screwed up. If I was just watching the game on TV, I would go, well, look at the replay. No wonder it was 3rd and 3 and they were playing 5 yards off the ball. I understand that frustration. But when I seen the big plays happen, the Justin Fields read option that he took, he's still running with, right? Or was it might have even been Jalen Hurts. I know it happened with Fields and it happened with Hurts 2 different times. But there were missed tackles. And it's like, we're paying Adrian Amos all this money. On top of that, we put on like 3 voidable years. So we're paying for him next year too, if I remember correctly, in cap terms, right? And it's like, he needs to make that tackle. That's what they're talking about with Anthony Johnson Jr. in that role. He's got great top-down instincts. He could play that Amos role. He's great at what they call play ID. I call it play rec. It's just recognizing the play early, whether it's a run, a pass, a play action, understanding, having that peripheral vision to look at other route runners that are not lined up directly across from you and them tipping their hand that this is a play action pass. I don't need to bite completely on the run here. I call it play recognition, reading the screen, all those things. And he actually played a little corner early too. So shows you he's got the athleticism to be a cornerback, but he's a true safety. That's someone that you might want on the shelf and playing with that top down instinct. So I thought that was very encouraging as well. So according to those guys, right? And again, it's just a couple of opinions. Look out for Kobe Wooden. Look out for Anthony Johnson Jr., and they're not going to be surprised if Tucker Kraft is going to step right into that Y tight end starting role, okay? And Jaden Reed, It confirms everything we've seen on tape. He's going to be a 3-level player. Now, one of the things they pointed up as we wrap up here, guys, they drafted local players, Midwest type, right? Guys out of the Midwest. Why? Because they're comfortable playing in the cold, right? They're talking about tough outdoor football. That's why they really lean on those Midwest guys. That's why they went with, people like a Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave and even Jaden Reed, right, at Michigan State, if I remember correctly. I've got so many players and colleges in my mind right now. I'm sure I've screwed a couple of these colleges up along the way, but players that are used to playing in the cold. They even mentioned that Pittsburgh, actually, it came down to Le'Veon Bell and Eddie Lacy, and they chose Le'Veon Bell because I believe Le'Veon Bell played at Michigan State. Eddie Lacy played down south, and I think they said he had never played in a game above 60 degrees. Guys, that matters. That freaking matters. So, good stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Like I said, I just wanted to hit on it. Before we wrap up here, I just want to look in the chat. I appreciate everybody hanging out. RDC2, Zane, all you guys in the chat, everybody on YouTube and Twitter, we appreciate you dropping by. Let's see here. Zane in the chat, RDC in the chat says, I'm looking forward to seeing Reed in pads. Reed, Dobbs, and Watson could be a force. I like this team on paper this team on paper is better than last year's 8-9 record, but I'm an optimist. I think you and I might be the same person, to be honest with you, man. I look at it and I see 6 to 10 wins. That's what I see. So your 8-9 record right there in the middle of kind of what I'm predicting, right? And I choose to be an optimist too. People call me what do they call me? Sunshine and rainbows type fan. Yeah, I would rather be on that side than just walking around being depressed all the time. Zane in the chat said Packers third rounders never works out for some reason. I hope Kraft can change that theory. I completely agree. I heard somebody say on Twitter the other day, him chugging beers with David Bakhtiari. Maybe that was to reverse the third round curse. But for whatever reason, man, you're right. Third rounders have just they're just not panning out. RDC, of course, says that's true, Zane. And then, of course, he talked about Tony Mandrich and said Tony has a great testimony. He does, man. He really does. The thing that I really enjoyed about that whole conversation was he said something that was very powerful to me. He said, I try to stay quiet about my faith and the things that are important to me. But what I'm noticing is everyone else is talking about their stance, right? And they're cramming that down my throat. I'm going to start being more vocal. And I respect that because, in our country, our current climate, people should be able to speak their mind and people that disagree should be able to respectfully disagree. For some reason, we've accepted this, that it's okay just to completely try to dunk on people and bash people for their opinions. And that's not what makes this country great. What makes this country great is we've got people from every freaking walk of life, every race, every country, every background. That's what makes America great, right? Now, none of that matters if only one side's going to get to tell their story. If only, it's just ridiculous. It is. I loved his testimony. I love that he said that because he's going out there, putting himself out there and going, yeah, this is my religion. This is my faith. This is my belief system. This is what I think our country should be. And it doesn't mean I'm right. It doesn't mean you're stupid for believing the way you believe, but I'll be damned if I'm going to let somebody silence me because we disagree. That's not what makes this country great. Him finding out that his parents were Croatian immigrants was just so cool, right? And finding out that Nick Saban, a young Nick Saban back in 1984, I think he said, it was in the early 80s, recruited him. And Nick Saban was the defensive backs coach for the Michigan State team at the time. The great Nick Saban, arguably the greatest, I don't even think it's arguably anymore, the greatest NCAA coach in history. Now, maybe we'll see Kirby Smart unseat him from that. We'll see. Time will tell. But that was the guy that recruited him. And just knowing, immediately it hit me and went, oh, dude, that makes so much sense. Nick Saban is Croatian. Bill Belichick and him connected because Bill Belichick's family was Croatian immigrants. And finding out that they were, his parents were Croatian immigrants that moved to Canada. And then, of course, his brother went on to play Kent State football. While he was down here playing football, he convinced his parents to let Tony move down there for his senior year in high school so he could get some local publicity. And, of course, Nick Saban kind of recruited him to Michigan State. And you heard Nick Saban say it as well, man. Not only were the general managers, head coaches, all these people, Nick Saban said to this day, he is the greatest offensive lineman, the most dominant offensive lineman I've ever seen play the game. 6'6", 308 pounds, ran a 4.640. And it was so cool hearing him talk about how he prepared for that 40. And it's another reason why I'm a little bit hesitant on some of the measurables like that, because these guys now have coaches. They have these training tactics to go, okay, this, like he said, this ain't going to help me on the football field. Me running a 40-yard dash has nothing to do with me on the football field. But by God, this is what the roadmap says is going to get me paid. I'm going to train my butt off, and I'm going to ace that part of the exam, right? Pretty cool. Now, last chat here, RDC says, I'm rooting for Owens to succeed. I like Jonathan Owens as well at safety. I also like Tarvarius Moore. I think Tarvarius Moore has a lot more tools to work with, but it seems like Jonathan Owens might be a little bit better tackler. I'm not expecting much from those two, but again, every time we doubt Goody with these cheap free agent signings, look what happens, right? People, they didn't expect anything from Devondre Campbell. The guy came out and was an all-pro, right? Linebacker. They didn't expect anything from Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas was one of our best defensive players that first year with the Packers, and we'll never forget that game-sealing interception in the end zone against Arizona, right? That Kyler Murray tried to go back shoulder to A.J. Green, and Rasul Douglas sealed it there. You got several picks. Even last year in Miami, Rasul Douglas is one of the players that really comes to mind, with I think he might have had 2 interceptions in that game. He at least had one, and it was very crucial. It might have sealed the game. But, yeah. So Jonathan Owens, Tarvarius Moore, you got Darnell Savage, you got Rudy Ford. Now you've got Anthony Johnson Jr., which these guys were real high on. That's how you try to fix that problem. You handle it one of two ways. You either go pay top dollar for someone who's absolutely proven and he's going to perform like he has in the past, or you take multiple cheap swings, whether it's in the draft or late in free agency, to try to fix that problem. It's worked out in the past for the Packers. Let's see if it works out here. So that's it, guys. We're going to get out of here. Like I said, this was kind of a surprise pod. Decided to go live on YouTube and Twitter. Didn't want to share the camera. There's no point in you guys having to stare at my ugly mug while I'm talking in the screen. We had a bunch of viewers today, so we appreciate everybody dropping in on this Saturday. We're supposed to hit 88 degrees down here in Tennessee. I'm going to go out here and I'm going to look like a beach swell, man. I'm going to get out here in this pool and try to get sunburned a little bit today. And who knows, we might have a couple daddy sodas and drink a couple cold ones while we're out there. But whatever you guys do today, hope you have a great day. For those of you listening on the pod, appreciate you making us a part of your day. RDC in the chat says, thanks for your time. Great content. Hey, we appreciate you dropping in, man. We really, really appreciate your time. So we're going to get out here as always. Let's go out and be the change we want to see in the world, and go Pack go.
On the right side, taking Balaga's spot. 2nd down and 2. Little flip here to Jones. Gets a block. And Jones out in front. They're trying to chase him down. He's inside the 10. And Jones down the sideline. He is in for the touchdown. 67 yards.
He's seen man-to-man coverage on a linebacker on his running back. He does the same thing. A little short motion. Get him the ball. And there's just no way that they can compete with Aaron Jones in that kind of space.